Hello everyone. Today we're gonna see about our exercise 5 of our DBMS class. So in this exercise we are asked to do download Eclipse IDE. So which I have already done here. As you can see, this is my Eclipse which is running, and I have installed my Eclipse in my user. So my user is Agil. So I'll just go to my user, and as you can see over here, so this is my Eclipse workspace, and I got my database and servers in here. And the next step is to download and install Tomcat 9, which I've already done before. If you have seen my previous exercise videos, you could see from that. I'll just show it here where I've installed it. So it's in my users again. So if you go here, you can see my Apache Tomcat here. So it is installed over here, and it is in my users. And next we have to open our Eclipse, and then we have to show that my Apache is selected and added in my Eclipse. So here you can see, so this is my server list over here. So if you see my server list, you can see that this is Apache Tomcat 9 server, which we have installed in this Eclipse. And then let's see here. So the fifth one is to go to my MySQL workbench and then create a table and then run these following commands. So we have to run these commands to our MySQL table. So let's just go to my MySQL. So this is my MySQL workbench. The first thing is to use the database testdb, which we already created. So let's just do that, and we can see that we are successfully using that. And the next command is to drop a table if exists, which is user. So I don't think we have a table named user. So yeah, if there's no table, then there's gonna be no change to a database. The next thing is to create a table if it does not exist, that is user. So this table has email, first name, last name, password, birthday, and then this is specified as not null because we definitely need a birthday, so it's gonna be not null. And then it's gonna be address, address street, city, and all those things. And then finally we have cache balance and PPS balance. So two variables here, which is decimal, and that is 13 to 2, and here the same decimal is 13 to 2 with the default value of 0 here, and the default value of cache balance should be 1000 here. So if a user does not enter a value, this is going to be taken as a value for them. So let's just create this table over here, and also our primary key is email. I forgot to mention that. So let's run this. You can see here our table is created successfully, and now we're gonna insert some values to our table. So this is our table right here, and we're gonna insert all these values. So let's just select all and then enter it. So now we have run this code, so it says all the values are inserted. So let's just check it. So if we select start from user, so we'll be able to see our values in the table. So we have all these values here for our table, and yeah, so I think we have done that part. So let's go look at the sixth step here, so which is to install, go to this database and then GitHub file, and then we're gonna download and unzip into our projects archive, which I have done here. So if you're gonna see my Eclipse, sorry, let's go here. Okay, yeah. So if you go to my Eclipse workspace, you can see that I have got a database here, so which is from this GitHub file. So I have already created that here. So let's go to our next step, which is to update the project, runtime, all those things. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So this is our database which I imported. Click properties, and then we have to go to project facets, and here I have a Java version 17. That's what I currently run on. So whichever Java version it is, we have to mention it appropriately here, and also Java compiler, it's gonna say it's 17. So that's good. So let's go to the next step here. So the next step is to change the user ID and password on your server. So since we already made the changes, I'll just show it to you here once. So if we go to our user.dao file here, which is in our database folder, so here you can see the connect request. So in this connect request, we have to change our user and password according to our MySQL database. So in my MySQL database, if you see here my users, So I have a John user here with the password which is exactly matching to this one. So we are going to use that. So the next thing which we have to do is we have to go to our Project Explorer, Web Content, and run register.jsp file on the server. So let's go ahead and do that. So here it is my Eclipse workspace. So in this we'll go to my Web Content folder here, and then we will find register.jsp. Then we'll run it on the server. Here we are running it on Tomcat server, so let's just click finish, and then a questionnaire pops up. So let's just fill in with an example case here. So for username, I'm gonna type in a Logan, and that's gonna be my first name as well. And for last name, I'm gonna go with Paul. And for birthday, yeah, that thing works, right? 2008. And for password, I'm gonna keep it simple and then do 1234 here, and this is the same confirmation, so that should be fine. And we click register. So when we click register, the next page pops up, which is welcome to PPSV login page. So we have to use the same username that we used before, so which is Logan. Yeah, it's the one we used, and the password which we used was 1234. So if we use that here, we're gonna see that we have successfully logged in here to our page, and we can log out. So that's the good thing, that this data is updated to our database. So we can just quickly go ahead here. We can see that our registration was successfully added to our database. So if we go to our database, which is in MySQL, so here, so if we select start from users now, hopefully our username should be there. So here, see, there's Logan, which we have just added right now with this date of birth and then the password. Yeah, that thing works. So now let's log out. And then one interesting thing that we have here in our application is that whenever a root user gets to log in, they're gonna have a different view, which is the root view. So let's see how that works here. So our username is gonna be root. Oh, we're gonna have small here, sorry, root. And then our password is, let's just go ahead and check that from our database. So our root username password is pass1234. So let's just go into that, which is pass1234. I'll click login. So here we can see that this user gets a list of all users because he's a root user, so he gets to see all the users that are added to our database. And there's a special function for this user. So if you can see the top, there's something called as initialize the database. So if we click that button, whenever we click the initialize database button here, it's gonna reset, and then it's gonna display some values which are actually created by the root user. So these values, if we can go to our user.dao.java file here, if we scroll through in this, we could see that there's an initialize function, and in that function this values here, so this is gonna be all the values that we manually enter is gonna go disappear, and then all these values gonna be inserted. So it's like a way for a root user to actually reset the database, and that's how this one works. So let us just quickly go through how and what functions we have in this database. So the first thing is user.dao.java. This is the main function, main Java file here. So let's go from the beginning. So first we're gonna import a file not exception found a package here because we're gonna use it in our function. Then we're gonna create a user public class, and then we're gonna have some variables here which is initialized to null at the beginning. And then we're going to have a connect function which is used to connect to our MySQL database with the username John and password as pass1234. And then let's go to the next one, which is database login. So it's going to have an email and password. So this is used when we have to log into our page. So this page can be viewed here. So if we just run this, run on server, let's just click this one. Yeah, let's restart the server. Yeah. So yeah, so this page. So this page actually accepts a username and a password. So we can just use that username and password, and then if we click a root and password as star, and then it's going to go to a different separate page, else it's going to be the same. Right. So that's our database connect here. And then let's see what was there. And then the next one is connect function, which you have seen already. So it's going to use our the username and password, which I already mentioned at the top here. So these are different variables which we're going to use. So it's going to use that. And then we have list all users. So this can be used from the root user here. So if we just log into a root user again, so we have a root, and then the password is pass1234. If we just log in here, we can see that it's going to list all users here. So whenever we log in as a root user, then it's going to just display all the users that we have using. So that is performed using this function. And then we're going to have a disconnect function to show that if there is any exception errors happening. And then this insert function, which we saw in the registration page. So whenever we're going to add a new user, it's going to get prepared statements, and then it's going to get filled in to these question marks here. So there's about 8 to 10 question marks, and each of them is going to fill by each thing that we enter here. So all this data is going to get entered here, and it's going to send back to our database. And the next function is a delete. So we can delete from a user if you want with rather than email. So with the email we can delete an user. So let's just see here. So here you can see we have all the list of users, and then yeah, if you want to delete any users, we can do that as well. So let's go back to our thing here. Yeah, Eclipse. So we have an update function also here. So whenever you have an update, we can update the function, and then we can get the users, and then we can also check mail. So what this does is, so it's gonna select a user where email is that particular function, and then we can see how that works as well. And there's also check password, and then there's another function called is valid here. So it's gonna just print all the select star statements from the user, and it's just gonna check if the email and password is valid. If it's not valid, then it's gonna print out an error. And this is the initialization function which we saw earlier. So whenever a root user clicks the initialize one, like this one here, it's gonna get reloaded, and all the data values is gonna get reset to the default ones that we have here, all these things. So yeah, that's about it for the user.do.java file, and all the things that we are gonna enter is gonna go through a control servlet. So in here, like the previous exercise we have seen, so this is gonna be like our main function here. So this is gonna be like our medium for our web page and our database. So whenever you give a login function, then it's gonna go for a request response. So for example, if you're giving a login, let's go find that. So we're going for a login request. So let's find here. So yeah, there's the function for login. So whenever we go there, it's gonna go to this page. So it's gonna get our email and password, and then if the email is root and the password is 1234, we're gonna go for a different section here, which is gonna be the root page. So the root page is another thing which we will see here. So if it is a root, then it goes through something called as root page, which is right on top. Okay, so it's gonna go here. You can see that it's gonna say a root view, and then we're gonna go into this JSP file. I can just open this up, and then I can just show you how this looks. So this is the case what that happens if we gonna log in with the root user. Then it's gonna display all the users, which we saw using the user.dao Java. We saw that there was a list users, so it's gonna go run that. So with that, let's see here. So we have seen this JSTL function last exercise. So it's gonna see for each. That means that for every user in the list of users that we have in our database, it's gonna get the user email, first name, last name, and all those things, which is the password, birthday, and everything, and it's gonna display it here on our web page like this, in this format. It's gonna display it in a table format. So that's how that works. So that is the root view that we have here. So let's continue with that. So if it's not a root, right? So then it's gonna say if it's a valid email ID and password, then it's gonna say okay, login successful, and now it's gonna redirect to a new page called as then activity page.jsp, which is right over here. So let's just open this and see. So this is what happens when you just log in with a normal user. You're going to be a welcome, you have been successfully logged in, and then there's going to be an option to log out. So whenever we're going to go log out, it's going to go to login.jsp file, which is this one. So whenever we log out, it's going to go back to our login page, and then it's going to display that here we input our email and the password. It's like a cycle here. So whenever we log out, it's going to go back to our login page here. And also there's an option to register if we have to register in our login page. Yeah, so let's go back to our controls right here. So that's one of the primary functions here. Then there's a register function, which is right over here. Let's see, right? Yeah, register is here. So it's a void register function. So in this, we're gonna get we're gonna enter our details, right? So which is our email, first name, last name, like we have seen here. So if we just run this, we can just see that this is the registration page. So it's the username, first name, last name. So whatever things we enter here in this field, which is going to be retrieved over here. So the email is going to have that email that we entered. Similarly for other fields, and then it's gonna confirm if the password equals, like if it's the same password, and also it's gonna check the email, and then after that it's gonna say yeah, registration successful, and add it to database. So what it does is it's gonna send all the data that we just entered right now to the user.do file, which is right over here. So what this is going to do is it's going to insert all these values to our database. So yeah, that's what the user.do does. Alright, so here there's an else statement. If the password is not same, or if it says there is some error, then it's gonna be like, yeah, if your username is not taken, enter a new username and all those things. So yeah, that's about the registration. Let's look at the initialization. So which is right over, let's see where it is. Let me see. Okay, it's gonna go to initialize. Okay, so whenever we're gonna go for the initialize function, it's gonna go for a root page, and then here, as you can see over here. So the initialization function can only be done from the root page, and then it's gonna call the user.do.initialization function, which we saw earlier, which is right over here. Let me see if I can find it. Wait, I think it's down below. Let me see. Yeah, right over here. So it's gonna go to the function which is gonna reset all our values and then display these values that were preset in our code. So that is the initialization, and this is the slash root. If that's the case, it's gonna go for a root page. That is also the same as the previous one, so it's gonna just go back to our user.do, and then it's gonna do that. So here we can see that this is gonna do a root view, and then it's gonna list all the users that we saw the previous one. Also there's the list command, so if that is the case, it's gonna do a list of all users. You can see here it's a list users, and it's gonna give numbers here, which will be helpful for us to see that if the function has started and the function has ended, it's gonna be like once. And then what this does is it's gonna just go to a user list.jsp, which is right over here. So let's just open this. So in this user list is same as it has the same JSTL core commands here. So C for each, that means for every user in the user list, it's gonna get all those data from our database, and then it's gonna list it over here. So that's what this does. Right, so let's see how this works. And then it's a parameter and all those things. Yeah, and the rest are the same. And I think I've explained almost all the JSP files here with the Java files. And let me just do a quick diagram which just shows how everything works, which will be very easy to understand. Alright, so here I've created a flowchart to represent our database working here. So whenever we have a web page input, so let's say that we have opened a register.jsp, right? So let's just open this, run on server real quick. Yep. So whenever we give an input over here and then click register, so what's gonna happen is that, let's just go back to this one. Yeah, so whenever that happens, it's gonna get our data to our register.jsp to our control servlet. So what our control servlet does is, so let's just go to control servlet. So since it is a registration action, so we can just go to that file. So it's gonna get all those values and then it's gonna call user.davo, right? So it's gonna go for user.davo here. So that's what we have given here. So whenever it goes for control servlet, then it goes to user.davo, which is manually going to insert all those values into our database management system. So here in this code you can see that the user.dao, if we go to our insert statement, which is over here, then it's gonna insert all our values as MySQL commands, like over this here, and then it's gonna insert the values that we entered to our database. So that's what happens when we give a command from a web page input. So wait, how do we, so this is for the input side, right? So let's look up an image for our output side as well. So here I have another flowchart which describes our output page. So first, whenever the value gets changed from a database, so it's gonna go to our user.davo. Well, let's say we have to get a user, right? So user.davo, what it does is it's gonna get the user, right? So it's gonna get all the string name, birthday, and all those address fields. It's gonna get it, and then it's gonna pass it to our control servlet, right? So in our control servlet, if you see over here, so like the list function which is over here, so what this does is it's gonna get all those values from our user.dao file, right? So it's gonna get all those values over here and then it's gonna send it to our controls to our JSP file, which can be used over here. If you can see, yeah, it's gonna send it to a user list.jsp file, right? So it's gonna send it to the corresponding JSP file for it to be displayed on our web page output. So that's how this thing works. So I think that's about it for exercise 5. I think I've explained everything. Let me just double check that we have explained everything. Huge step, yeah. We have explained how everything works over here. So yeah, I think we explained everything. In case I missed out something, please do let me know. And thank you for your time to watch to this lecture. Thank you.